never be scared to press the eject button in your career path and make a change. And always think about an institution that sometimes you have to leave it in order to come back to it. That is very difficult in organisations during times of change, restructure, dealing with the plethora of things that come with being a manager or particularly a leader. Looking at the user interface and the user experience of technology now, that is only just going to keep developing. Is going to be absolutely phenomenal over the next 5 years. I think how people can leverage tools, it is like the rebirth of the library or the rebirth of Wikipedia. Gosh, that's a tough question.
Hey Mark, happy Friday. Super happy to have you on board the Virtus Voices podcast. How's your week been?
Interesting week in October, where's the year went. But good to finish off the week having a conversation with yourself.
Glad to have you on board. Just for our guest, it'd be great if you could kind of intro yourself and kind of, what you've been up to in the past few years.
No problem at all. My name is Mark Baker. I'm the Head of Project Delivery for Transformation at the University of Glasgow. My team helps support the work of 2 change portfolios. That is our transformation agenda and the programme that supports our learning and teaching strategy. I've got a team of senior project managers, coordinators, a data analyst and an emerging PMO, and our PMO also supports the work of my peer, Stephen Manson and his team, and they focus on the IT projects that the IT investment fund the university has. So collectively across both of our teams, that's 2 or 3 of the fairly substantial investment funds that university has. I worked in local government for a number of years across a couple of different local authorities, albeit I started in the kind of field of architecture and construction after my own studies. I took voluntary severance at 50, thinking I might have a early retirement, but that never quite panned out. So although I've been here a couple of years, worked my way up through the kind of construction side in local government and found myself in a senior role. Moved around Scotland a little bit and now live in the southwest of Scotland, and really have enjoyed that transition from local government into the higher education sector. I see the similar challenges which some might touch on. I am fortunate enough to have grown a team over the last couple of years while the institution has invested in transformation resources. Yeah. And I've always said I've never worked at an organisation where we've had the ability to tap into a number of different SMEs and different skills, ranging from business analysts, process improvement staff. We have UX designers, the kind of teams of the skills that I never had in local government. So it's a real kind of pleasure, and it actually makes it a much better experience for the end user that we've got different skills and experiences we can tap into from the kind of start to the completion of a project, particularly at the completion stage around transition and hypercare and benefits realisation. So I feel a fairly rounded response to your introductory question.
No, thank you for that as well, and we'll definitely kind of drill into the details around that. One thing we like to do as well is we ask our last guest a question for our next guest.
Right.
So a question for you is, what's the most ridiculous leadership advice you've ever heard?
This sounds actually quite simple, but it's that kind of just do it, that leap of faith. I think I know that doesn't sound ridiculous, but I think sometimes that gung-ho attitude is right for the right sector and the right type of development of certain things. But in the type of organisations I've worked in, the type of stakeholders, especially when it's public money, I think just making sure your pathway is as good as it can be is that kind of response to sometimes ridiculous expectations rather than ridiculous advice.
And rewinding kind of within your career, how did it kind of kick off and kind of lead you to where you are today?
Yeah, it's a good question. When I started after university, I worked in very small architectural firms. They weren't large at all, and I kind of think to myself, I've worked in very small organisations, and therefore the development within that, or the ability to stretch yourself, is kind of fairly limited, albeit you could also argue that, that therefore you've got a pathway to whatever the organisation wants to take you. But when I went into local government, it started at Aberdeenshire Council, which I can't remember off the top of my head the exact number, but you're probably talking about 15,000 plus staff. So going from an organisation with less than 100 to 15,000, it was quite an experience. And I can always remember kind of working there in the early days where I was a contractor and working in the Estates Department. I didn't see myself as someone who had a great amount of ambition, to be honest. I was ambitious in what I did as a day job.
Yeah.
I was ambitious about my own practice, but I wasn't exactly ambitious as to someone who wanted to climb a corporate ladder or have more or have more experience or a leadership role or the ability to work up within an organisation. But that just naturally occurred. I'll also say a product of luck, being a product of having the right mentors and the right people around about you that had faith in you, and being in the right place at the right time and applying for the right roles. I think it was a combination of those factors. So over a number of years, I was able to have different roles within estates and an architectural function, then move into kind of business change. A real push from that organisation around workplace design and mobile and flexible working was a role that I was able to take on and applied for, and that was a fantastic project at the time. Thoroughly enjoyed it, and then that was that springboard into where does that take you in terms of growing your teams, growing your roles, expanding those skills. And that take you up to a certain ceiling. And I continued that growth into a more senior role, but in coming up to kind of 50 years old, there was the opportunity to do something differently, and I couldn't see myself doing that until I was 65-ish, or 66, 67, what the government decides what they know is the date you retire. So I had the opportunity to change, and in doing so, I think I wanted to do something different. And I think landing in higher education kind of made that difference.
And you said that you wasn't quite interested in, climbing the corporate ladder or kind of getting to that management position. But how did you find that first transition into your first leadership role?
Yeah, that's a good question. Interesting, there was actually some peers I was working with at the time that turned around to me and said, you are really ambitious. And I'd never actually seen myself as ambitious at that time. So I applied for a permanent role with that council. It took me into the first time was probably I'd been leading through change in physical space redesign, and sometimes that could be hundreds of staff are taking them through what is quite an emotive experience, is moving people's offices round about and the physical space. So dealing with that does have a certain level of leadership. Going in to lead and manage staff and manage people, and therefore you're dealing with everything that comes with management as well as trying to lead. Yeah, that took some learning in my mid to late 30s. There was absolutely no doubt about it. There were some real successes there and some real challenges. I am probably not as gung-ho and forthright as I was back then, I think, or I have certainly tempered as I've got older. That was a kind of turning point, because I think from there I kind of relished activities. I relished seeing the successes of myself because of the other people I worked with and the teams that I had. So the two go hand in hand, and from there I just probably looked for the right opportunities as I went through my career path at that point, and kind of grabbed at secondments and worked on some unusual projects. You'll find the answers I give you to the questions, although you're asking me about my experience, I will always temper that with the kind of journey of those around me, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, because I feel like you need people to drive anything, right? And if you don't bring people on the journey with you, then nothing will ever land, right?
I'm sure there is obviously fortunate people in the world that come off and they're absolute trailblazers in their own right, and they're one people band in what they do, or they're kind of figureheads of massive organisations. But within the spread of that, they're either some geniuses within there, but they've all started in the garage somewhere.
I was actually going to ask you. You said about obviously kind of that first step into leadership. You didn't actually think you were that ambitious person, but you got told by people around you. Just like out of interest, where you did take that first step into leadership, you mentioned earlier on about mentorship. So you must have had mentors early on. Was there any advice that was given to you? And like, is there anything that stuck with you to where you are today?
Yeah, I was really lucky at that time probably to have two mentors. As much as a great line manager at the time, I must admit she was absolutely brilliant. I had a really good internal mentor within that organisation who saw, and I'd probably say this as well. I love being able to work with other people where you see something in them that they don't see themselves. And I think I was at that point at the time. At the same time, I applied to join a programme where I was given a mentor from out with local authority. So at that time, it just happened to be a vice chancellor from the Robert Gordon University. So the combination of those two and myself was that triangulation factor in everything you did. So over a year, as I grew into those senior roles, I was able to work with obviously my line manager, but those two mentors, and just be able to kind of sense check what you do in your practice and how you do it, and especially pick apart things that are going wrong. And sometimes a kind of bell curve within an organisation, a bell curve within people that you rely on management and culture and the way an organisation works, and then you get to kind of tipping point over that with the most senior staff where that kind of seems to get thrown out the window sometimes, and the kind of the behaviours aren't tempered, let alone tolerated. But I kind of had some of those type of experiences, and the support of both those individuals were absolutely key for me to kind of grow.
And is there anyone that you like influenced by today in terms of leadership? Or
because I don't look at that type of kind of external learning, I have went from being in a situation in a previous role where I probably got into a stage where I knew the sector very well, I knew my daily practice, I knew what the cycles of the year were, and not that it was not monotonous in any way. I was comfortable in that my skills. Coming into the higher education sector, I was immediately de-skilled, and I had to kind of start learning again from not the ground up, but what made this sector and this organisation tick. Within that, I was lucky enough to work with some of the most senior staff in university, as well as those around me, and I have got a huge amount of admiration for those academically brilliant individuals that I happen to find myself working with. Coming here where the focus is around the staff and the student experience, I have found that real focus in those individuals inspiring, and I work with inspirational people, not just in the academic side, but in the professional services side of the institution. So yet again, probably similar to the last answer, I focus on the environments that's round about me rather than those others. I could sit here, yes, and give names of world leaders or authors of books, but I get more satisfaction out of my learning from those that are around about me.
No, that's amazing, and I think it's good that that's kind of the messaging as well. Is that if that keeps coming back, is that the people around you, the people that inspire you, not people that you see online or short video clips that are edited and get you that motivation, but the people around you inspire you. And like you said at the start, is that you need people to build anything, to create success. If you had to pick one standout success, what would that be?
There's two successes I'll always stick with. One's probably a very simple one, and it was during my architectural career where a firm was really struggling, and they came to me with a really ridiculously low budget to try and get a reception desk. So I designed and managed to manufacture a reception desk for a ridiculously low amount of money, and the client was absolutely emphatically chuffed to bits with it. And I really liked the design of it too. So many years ago, it was a company in Aberdeen that helped me get it manufactured and installed, and that always sticks in my mind that I had a really satisfied client with a tight budget. From a large project point of view, as much as what we're working on just now is absolutely fantastic at university, at the time at Aberdeenshire Council we're launching what was called Work Smart Mobile and Flexible Working Programme. There was a very small project team. There was just myself and two others as a core team, and that year was a real kind of formative year, of a learning year for me, whilst we went out into an organisation which was either predominantly the not desk-based staff, or the desk-based staff had never had anything more than a desktop PC and a fixed place of work. So to go into a huge physical estate across the northeast of Scotland and change their working practices and change how they access the systems and how they travelled and how they interacted as a team, that was a massive, a really, really formative change programme at pace, at scale, which really, really can just happen to be one of those right places at the right time programmes. So I think there's two examples of two extremes actually of what we've experienced and kind of everything in between.
How do you handle leadership under pressure? Because I think a lot of people sometimes think making mistakes is like the end of the world, but I think like you said at the start again, that's where you learn.
I think being around a human being is really important, but by within that I mean it's time to switch off, time to ensure that you're around for your family and friends, and that you spend weekends recharging, good hobbies, do something that you also ensure that you have some time to yourself. So there's a couple of things that my wife is quite happy that I go off and have a couple of hobbies and do certain things, and I think that allows you to balance out your thinking. It doesn't mean to say you're switched off, it just means to give you space to think effectively. And keeping in touch with those mentors, or even the mentee, the kind of mentees you might even have at the same time, so you can spread your own experiences. So having that type of environment to make sure you can recharge, rebalance, and I think yes, there's loads of different styles of leadership, but I think the best leaders are the ones that bring calm to a storm. And when things are not going well, it's just how you're able to ensure that you can speak to the right individuals, bring them into that space where you're becoming collegiate again, and just try to cut through the issues, and try and do that with a kind of sound, safe head, and let them know they're in a psychologically safe space to do that, to use a kind of more modern term. I've been lucky enough to see some of the best of leadership and the worst. Same with management styles, and I think anyone, as an individual leader, if they go through their own career path, you should be able to pick and choose from that experiences you've had, and emulate or mould some of that kind of journey into part of who you are. And I say part because you also need to bring that element to it as to what you are as an individual. So you never want to see facsimiles of someone else, but you need to be able to kind of you need to be able to kind of just learn as you go, ensure that you are true, kind of you've got integrity in what you do. I think that's hugely important, and where you can be wholly honest with people, and be honest when you cannot, and be clear with them when you cannot tell them when certain things are happening in the background of an organisation. I think some of the worst activities I've seen is where people have actively not been forthright or honest with those around them, and that's something that doesn't, from a moral point of view, doesn't sit particularly well with that kind of inner compass, to be honest.
And when you are building high performing teams or building a team just generally, like, what is it you look for in people?
I've always had the mantra, using kind of former words from a previous person I worked with, that closing the gap and stretching the top of our collective skill sets is absolutely essential. What I do like to do when I'm interviewing is look for that extra thing that sometimes that individual doesn't realise that they've got, and I'll think how I can capitalise that, and think, look at the jigsaw puzzles of teams that we have and how that person can fit into that slot. Also, at the same time as you're interviewing, it's not just that job that you're interviewing people for, it's what's the next job they could be doing. I think, fortunately or unfortunately, different roles I've had, I've probably interviewed 1,000 people for 200 jobs over my career, and that's not unusual by the time you get to to my age, and I have generally appointed, been really satisfied that people have been brought into my team, and I couldn't probably say there's key always the key same issues. I think attitude, aptitude, willingness to learn, willingness to take control of when things are going wrong, and just that kind of approach to life where you're constantly learning. I think there's kind of a combination of those. So yes, some technical skills, some human kind of empathy and human aspect, and also that ability to be quite clear about your career path. Do you want to be a generalist? Do you want to be a specialist? And just how you can lock those different individuals together.
How do you think you make people realise they're good at what they do, or build that confidence as well? Because I think that's really important.
Probably better ask a couple of team members that question. Is I probably stretch them. I really allow people with a set of parameters to go on with their day job, and I think within those parameters they know that I am continually accessible, and they've got that ability to micro fail in our conversations. So test bed everything that you do, and don't be scared to fail fast, fail quick, and get back on with things. So absolute no blame culture around about what we do. Notwithstanding, there needs to be that integrity and strength in what we do as well. But building a team culture where people can flex and stretch and learn from each other. Within that kind of that again, you'll use the term psychological safety, but also sometimes there's that spark of brilliance where it's either going to really, really work or it's going to absolutely fail. So I need to temper myself sometimes because I'm probably more optimistic than I should be at times. So it's good to have peers and those around me that just has that balance too. So yeah, and don't be scared. Don't be scared to push yourself. And there comes periods in your life where you're often children or getting married or you're travelling or whatever have you. It's just ensure that the pace of your own personal development's one that allows ebbs and flows and breaks, and try and get to a stage in your career where when things do go wrong, it's just don't let them take you by surprise. Just be able to absorb and let it sink in and work with others, then plan to address the issues.
And then when you stepped into leadership, obviously that was a kind of, let's say, newly formed team, but then also when you've come into Glasgow, I imagine there was a team kind of there originally.
Yeah.
So how did you build trust to then make sure that they bought into your mission as well, and a collective mission maybe?
I mean, the good thing is, I suppose I was a contractor at Glasgow for about 10 months before I started. So that's maybe a good or a bad thing. You went from being one of those kind of ethereal people that get paid money and dropped into the office now and again to all of a sudden you were kind of heads of one of the teams. The good thing was there was some really good leaders round about. I've got a cracking set of I've got a good line manager at the moment and a couple of peers, so we have got a good senior leadership team, and I think we work really well together. We're good at tempering each other and getting the best out of each other. So I was kind of fortunate in that sense that the institutional culture's there. The institutional culture's message is quite strong. How that's applied might vary naturally across parts of the organisation, but I was not someone who was coming in having to form that from the start. So I probably in the majority of people that are in my team are ones I've actually appointed just through attrition and change. So there's only a couple of members of the team who have been there longer than me. So I've been able to have a hand in those choices. So within that, I think, and that's been in a very short space of time over the last couple of years. So, and that's just not my own personal team. That's across a number of the kind of business partner and complementary teams within our own directorate, but actually other parts of the institution as well. So helping out some of your other peers when they're appointing various roles, whether it's in continuous improvement or change or project management. So they get the ability to kind of share their experiences and prop each other up. Scotland is quite a small community, and when you get into certain specialisms, those communities are even smaller. So it's not difficult to come across people more than once in your lifetime in that sense.
And we talk a lot about transformation, whether that's digital transformation as well. Why do you think transformations go wrong?
Well, there's a whole range of things around how you govern or run a project that can set something either up for success or otherwise. I think that starts from governance and how your stakeholders and your most senior leaders understand the difference between what might be their day job activities and then actually having a role within a transformation governance board. So I think there's some peer learning there that should always take place, and there's different kind of roles that those individuals have. And then it could be everything from the business case, the scope, the expectation, the speed. But within all of that, I still think the most important thing is that people relationship aspect. Yeah. And where there's been stories of massive IT projects failing across the public sector in the UK for years. But I think when you pick apart all of that, it has been the relationship between vendors, third-party support, external organisations, and it always again boils down to how individuals are working with each other. So it's how can those individuals absorb or be engaged with that collective change. So that is certainly a factor, not apathy, but really that kind of the capacity to absorb or engage with change, whilst you still have to run an organisation which ostensibly exists to provide a number of courses to students to go through each year. So I think when I've seen the best performing projects or programmes, it has been how those individuals have built a working relationship together, a professional working relationship, and have each other's backs when things go wrong.
I've been part of a transformation myself previously as well, and how do you manage expectations? Because I think that's also a difficult part. Like, everyone gets really excited at the start. It's like, this is a massive change. We've wanted the change. Can't wait for the change. But then there's kind of that middle part, I would say, where people maybe, you have your day job, your day to day, people have their own personal lives, so much going on that, that in that middle part, it still is important to make sure you keep the momentum, I imagine. Obviously, I haven't delivered these massive changes, but then to see that through to delivery and then make sure that, the business is happy and people are actually using, whether that's a new system or a new kind of setup internally, how the business is structured. Like, how do you keep that motivation and also manage the expectations?
I use the analogy it's like winding up a mechanical watch every day. That's what it feels like in the morning. That watch kind of dissipates over the day, and you start the next day by winding it back up. I think it's actually about having faith in what you do, faith in your own abilities sometimes, but in faith in what you're doing. That's also about a team or an organisation that's willing to stick it out. Some of the programmes we're working on are multi-year, multi-project programmes. So some of these have been shorter activities, 3-6 months. In a higher education academic cycle, that is probably quite short. Some of the programmes we work on are 2-3 years, and obviously then you have investment funds that look at 10-15 year journeys over multi-year or multi packages of IT replacement and investment. So you are looking at layers of different activities that are running concurrently, and I think being able to discuss and operate things strategically, understand the direction of an institution with a strong strategic plan, and then have the ability to have the right stakeholders and the right sponsors of those individual programmes in place, who are absolutely key to success, I think, and those that are able to stand front and centre with the project teams to help guide the messaging across the institution. So part of the comms engagement around that is making, as we've done and plenty of other organisations too, is actually take those individuals and have them as the face of that particular piece of activity. So I think also that means others within the organisation can have faith in those sponsors or stakeholders as well. So if a project's happening and it happens to be, have Mr. Smith as their sponsor, it's hopefully that Mr. Smith has been someone who has had tenure, integrity, the ability to deliver other things, has been seen as to be a cornerstone of that institution. I think focusing on that type of multi-layered environment means that at all times you are spinning plates again, probably another poor analogy, but you are constantly spinning a number of plates, and they all interlock with each other to a certain degree. So that probably brings me right the way around to that's what a mechanical watch looks like at the inside. You have all those little wheels and cogs interlocking, and they need to be all working in synergy. So, and that's where back to that team building part. You wrap individuals round parts of that mechanism and entrust them to do their part well. So it is its own kind of series of ecosystems to deliver these large programs over many years.
In today's world, we're in such like a digital first society. Like, how do you see the relationship between people and technology kind of evolving?
Being at a university and seeing how large language models, AI is developing at a pace, not just even from a research pace or a student use, or how staff even try and monitor its activity, to watch that and what will be other forms of digital activity work at such speed year on year. I mean, it has been absolutely breathtaking, and what I see about the generation of students come through is just absolutely second nature. Looking at the user interface, the user experience of technology now, that is only just going to keep developing. Is going to be absolutely phenomenal over the next 5 years, and in a learning institution, it's capitalising on that from a number of different angles. One, yes, it's I think from a research point of view, certainly from how students expect the institution to operate, how they engaged with, and that's not just in their learning, but every other part of the support that wraps round about that. Also staff, our own capabilities and skills as staff. Are we leveraging the best out of our own systems that we have, let alone investing in new ones? So creating space for that and creating learning, I think, is absolutely key. And it's within all that. What I do like to see is those non-digital parts of a learning institute as well, particularly those within areas of arts and humanities, which, yes, there's obviously a large digital aspect to that. University, museums in the metaverse and all the type of really interesting activities. But, just at times there's parts of life which are non-digital. So I actually think to see that those sit side by side in harmony is actually quite interesting as well. So being in an organisation where there's so many students come from all over the globe, even to see the tech they carry around with themselves is absolutely phenomenal. I'm amazed by some of the laptops, handheld devices and other bits of kit that I see students playing around with in their large refectories, etc. So I'm always fascinated by what some of them are working on and what they're doing. But I think the proliferation of AI and how that's used, I think needs to be done in such a way that I think enhances the learning experience. Sometimes I do get concerned about the kind of wilder side of AI or its kind of odder side in social media, or how it's used to actually create some harm across the world. I think how people can leverage tools, it is like the rebirth of the library or the rebirth of Wikipedia, or that just cyclic nature of technology to support your own learning. If I was to go through the course I was doing, I couldn't imagine the kind of um, resources that those students would have now that certainly did not have anything like that, and that was only not that many years ago.
And like, out of interest on the AI topic, like, how do you stop people, because there's like different generations, right? Like you said, a lot of students coming through are using AI. They've got all these new tech gadgets, whereas maybe people in the older generation would be like questionable around AI. Some people might not be using it at all. Like, how do you manage people to not be resistant to that change? Because it's kind of like it's happening and there's kind of nothing you can do about it, and it's going to happen anyway. So I think it's important that you kind of do adopt it. But like you said, in the right ways.
From a peer point of view, my kind of concern and kind of area that I even personally want to develop in is actually just carving out the time to make sure that I can be as effective as I can in my own role with the tools I use daily. I know I am not using the best I could out of Copilot, for example, which is embedded within the tools we use. Equally, I think you have to respect those individuals that don't. I'll give you an example, an interesting example where I was speaking to a colleague quite recently about sifting CVs. Now, some organisations and some people relish the fact that they use AI to deal with recruitment processes.
Yeah.
I will probably never do that personally, because I think people deserve, even when we get 100 and we do get 100 applicants for individual roles now. So minimum three people you'll find on an interview panel, I want to read every single one of those applications. I will not feed them through an AI engine to look for keywords or key processes or key areas to try and reduce that number. I think it's only fair in people that show an interest in a role, an interest in an organisation, that you not only read what they've submitted, but in some instances you're reading between the lines of what they've submitted. And I think some of the best people I've appointed are the ones that just had some really interesting experiences or interesting journeys in their CVs that unless you could kind of join those up by reading them as a human being, I don't think AI would necessarily have picked up on the nuances of that.
I think it's really interesting, right? Because even if you think about your own career, there's probably so much you could put on your CV, but you maybe wouldn't put on your CV. And there's a lot of experiences that might not be there, but like just having a conversation like we are now, that you pick those up. And whether that's someone's such a good culture fit, like you said, that they've got the aptitude and the attitude, and obviously that's such a key part. Not just what have you delivered. I delivered 15% more operational success, or whatever it is, all the funny jargon and buzzwords, but more around who are they as an individual, and what can they do, and what is their personality and what can they bring. Because I think that's also really fundamental. It's not just a piece of paper or PDF, shall we say, nowadays in today's society.
Naturally, when someone's interviewing, that's what when they're responding to a question, you want to hear that. What does it do? How does it do it? What does it achieve? I want to hear a little bit of who they are as a human being as well come through. And that's not about asking them, what do you do outside of work? They have to kind of feed that into their kind of natural ability to answer those questions. So yes, contextualise them from a workplace point of view, but contextualise them from that kind of just kind of human being and who am I as an individual who's interested in joining your organisation or taking on this particular role. So I think that kind of roundedness is what you look for in an individual. Absolutely.
And if you could talk to yourself 10 years ago, with who you are today, what's one piece of advice you'd give yourself?
I would have probably told myself 10 years ago just to be a little bit slower, and I mean that as in absorb what was around about you a little bit more, and make sure you've kind of covered all aspects. Local government was a great. It still is, for many a great place to work in, but it's a complex environment. Large organisations are complex human machines, and I think I'd probably tell myself 10 years ago that just don't. It won't all happen immediately. Just give yourself more time. So, and I might even tell myself that in 10 years' time. You never know.
Yeah. And is there any advice that you'd give aspiring leaders today? Anyone that does want to climb, let's say, the corporate ladder?
I think that adaptability in leadership is absolutely key. So as an individual themselves, they have to be adaptable. Never be scared to press the eject button in your career path and make a change. And always think about the institution that sometimes you have to leave it in order to come back to it, especially if you're struggling to get through that career path. So sometimes it makes sense to go off and do something else and come back to that institution. And mainly, it's easy to say this, but really difficult in practice, especially as you do become a more senior leader, is do try and treat other people as you expect to be treated yourself. I mean, do not look for other sets of morals and guidance, which something you're not able to assimilate with, aspire to, or be part of, and that is very difficult in organisations during times of change, restructure, or dealing with the plethora of things that come with being a manager or particularly a leader. So a bit of humility within that, a bit of humbleness, especially if you maybe have been successful enough to climb a career ladder, and never be afraid to look for the people that are replacing you. I think that's absolutely key. Nurture those around you, and have an environment where it's self-sustaining in that sense.
And to summarise, what would you say makes a great leader from a good leader?
Gosh, that's a tough question. For me personally, I think different people would answer that question differently.
Yeah.
I think it's down to how that individual does treat other people. Now, you'll get a different answer to that if it was in the military, you'll get a different answer to it if it was in working for one of the big four, or within some of the very large IT companies that we have around the world. But for me personally, I think the greatest leaders I've either worked for, seen, or operate in different institutions or organisations are the one that really understands what makes that organisation tick. The response to that would always be a people-focused response.
I agree. 100% agree with you. And finally, if I was to ask you one last question, and for our next guest, what is one question I should ask them?
Are they spending enough time growing or nurturing the people to replace them? I think that's absolutely key. Always spend time on your key individuals that are there to take your place if things are change. If you as an individual get an offer and you're off in a month or 3 months, it's who's there internally. I think growing your own as an organisation is an absolutely fantastic thing to do. So spend time growing your own. Are they spending enough time growing their own?
So the question I should ask the next person is, how have they nurtured and grown their own teams?
Yeah.
And what was the best ways that they did that?
Yeah.
Or are they? Yeah.
Are they? Not do they, but are they currently, as it stands at the moment?
No, thank you for your time today, Mark. I really appreciated it, and it was great to kind of get to know you a bit more and understand your leadership journey.
Thanks for the questions, and good luck with the series.
Thank you very much. Cheers, Mark.